My question for you is about the debates. I think presidential debates don't really have that much of an effect. I think there were some exceptions. Obviously, 1960, when if you watched it on TV, Kennedy won. If you listened to it on the radio, Nixon won. 1980, when you just had that one debate between Carter and Reagan, and people just needed to see that Ronald Reagan wasn't some madman that was going to start a nuclear war. I think that helped. I think that the first debate between Obama and Romney, Obama put in a very weak performance, and fortunately, Obama had a pretty solid foundation, but that could have been more catastrophic. But typically, incumbent presidents don't really do that well in first debates. But then again, Trump is out of practice as well. I think not debating during the primaries may have helped him politically, but it hurt him in terms of his practice. So my long-winded question to you is, this is a huge debate. I think there's a lot for both candidates. I would say Biden probably has more to gain and more to lose. But what do you think the strategy should be for both candidates going into this debate? Because it's the earliest we've ever had one. And to put it mildly, a lot is at stake.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think debates, unless there is some significant gaffe or huge blunder, they don't really move the needle that far in either direction. So I guess it's more what's the potential downside versus the upside. So like a Dan Quayle gaffe or something. Um,
Or Ford in 1976 against Carter, when he said that Poland wasn't under Soviet control.
yeah,
That was a huge.
yeah. So there's the upside versus the downside. And I think that's part of why the reason why we're having the debate so early, we've never had one this early as I understand it, is because Trump has finally woken up to the importance of early voting. And the way the debate schedule was so packed so tightly to the election, he knew that people were going to be making their decisions much earlier now. And so he's woken up to that. So I'm glad to see that. And I think my advice, I'll give advice to both candidates. If I were advising Biden, I would say that, well, I mean, I disagree with this, so I'm not coming out of my mouth.
That's okay. Just be on Biden's campaign for a
Yeah.
second.
Well, the strongest weapon in his arsenal is the reproduction issue, just based on polling and the fact that that's all he has, really. Like, he's losing on all the other major issues like the economy, immigration, foreign policy. He's even losing on the issue of democracy and preserving democracy. Trump is winning in not just conservative polling I've seen. And so I know that Biden's going to want to bring up these types of issues, but
Mhm.
the Beltway establishment is obsessed with things that the average voter doesn't care about. So the more that Biden talks about things like, conspiracy theories, the more he talks about the trial. People think that trials are inherently political, and most keyly for him, again, I'm trying to. If I was advising Biden, independents don't care about the trials. It's not anywhere close to the top of the issues, and yet the media wants to shove it down the voters' throats. So I think if Biden is, like you said earlier, tuned into what working class voters care about, he's not going to be focusing on those issues. Similarly, I would advise Trump the same thing. Don't get dragged down on those issues. Focus on the things that people care about: inflation, the economy, immigration, foreign policy. People perceived Donald Trump as much stronger on foreign policy than Joe Biden. And so I would say to Trump, be disciplined. Don't meander. I know in their first debate, I think it was a universal sense that it was two men screaming at each other, and it was very dysfunctional. There was a lot of crosstalk. I hope they can at least stay in their lanes when they're talking with each other, and not at each other. Because I think that Trump just needs, also, like, as a contrast, because he's not the same cognitively as he was when he was a younger man. So Trump doesn't need to go out.
Neither of them are.
Well, I mean, sure,
Believe me,
sure.
Trump is failing too. But anyway, that's
Yeah, I
another
mean,
another conversation.
anytime you're either on either side, approaching either side of 80, um, of course, you and I, Dave, we will be exceptions. um,
What?
no, I think, comparatively speaking, I think there's been a far, devolution cognitively of Biden compared to Trump. Um,
Well, we disagree, but anyway, that doesn't matter. But go ahead.
well, it's not. I'm not the one saying this. Just polling says this. Like polling says that Trump is perceived as having
Anyway,
a greater grasp of, you know, the issues, and that he is perceived as stronger. So I would say just for each of them, stick to what is your strength. But what say you, Dave?
well, I would disagree slightly. I think that most of what you say, I agree with. But the one area I disagree is that as I've said, if is an election, if this election is a referendum on Biden, he loses. If it's a referendum on Trump, I think he loses. And Trump has done very well, as we've talked about before, by staying out of the limelight a lot this year. I think that one of the best things that ever happened to him was being banned on Twitter or X. I think he didn't participate in the debates. He has a much shrewder campaign staff this year. So now that he's starting to beat Trump, you notice the polls are tightening. In fact, there was a Fox News poll that came out just this week that showed Biden up for the first time. Now, granted, that's national, it's not state. But the point is, Trump is starting to be Trump. So let Trump be Trump. And I think one of the big mistakes Biden agreed to was being able to cut off the mics. And I hope that CNN will allow the crosstalk, because that's the best chance Biden has, is to really prod Trump, get under his very thick, thin skin, and get him to fly off the handle about stuff. I agree with you that people don't care that much anymore about January 6th or the trials, but what Biden needs to do is remind people of what they didn't like about Trump, because I keep saying, like a broken record, that people have these rose-colored glasses of the Trump administration. They forget about the chaos. They forget about how much he just screwed up COVID in so many ways. They forget about the coddling of dictators, all this stuff. And people, if Biden can remind them of that, then he has a chance. But most importantly, Biden cannot have any kind of senior moment. He can't confuse leaders. He can't lose his train of thought. He can't reinforce those stereotypes that are so deadly. So if he has a performance like he had at the State of the Union address, he does very well. If he has a performance as he had when he got all upset about people that report where they said he was a doddering old man, and then he confused the leaders of Spain and Mexico, I'm sorry, Egypt and Mexico, then that's going to be a problem. So as I said, Biden has a lot more to gain, but he also has a lot more to lose. And I think that if Biden messes up, I don't think there'll be a second debate. If I were Trump, I would not have a second debate, because the die hasn't been cast. And then I think you will see a movement to see Biden replaced, which, by the way, I still have not given up on my dream scenario of 1 or 2 weeks after the Republican convention that Biden bows out. And if he has a disastrous debate, then I think that's much more likely to happen. But what's your second question?